We are in front of the British Parliament. British Parliament, well, it associates with consciousness. It's the consciousness of the British people. I'm thinking about being a colonial empire and withdrawing into values of liberty, modernism, tolerance, human rights. All this is being processed in this building. It has to do with the conscious level. Nevertheless, the more the years accumulated, the British Parliament really influenced the collective unconscious, not only of the British people, but of mankind. Because why all these people are coming, millions of visitors to this capital city? People are connected with the basic values that this town, this city is offering to them. Diversity, acceptance of the individual. People look for symbols that resonate with their own personal stories. So when you tell me you're standing in front of a parliament, I see the Greek Senate, for example. I see the Knesset of the Israeli parliament. I see all those immense buildings that hold for the people their ethics, their values, and this all belongs to the conscious level. Nevertheless, just a couple blocks away, you will have the unconscious of this city. You will have the dungeons, you will have the Soho, you will have the Chinatown, you will have all these weird places that I'm very curious personally to mingle and to see, and these balances between consciousness and the unconscious of the people and the unconscious of the individual. Let's go for it. I am wandering in London, free associating with my own life experience and my own knowledge of Jungian psychology. So, Winston Churchill, what he has to do with me. First of all, going against the impossible. When I thought about Jungian coaching and turning into Jungian psychology into a practical method, it seemed impossible. And we know that Churchill was fighting the Nazi and the European disastrous situation against parliament voices, against any other idea about being able to win the Nazi monster. This is a connectedness to the leader, to the hero archetype that we are all talking about. But in order to become a hero, you have to get away with reputation, being loved by the others, and stick to your true self, to your authenticity. And this is something I am challenged on a daily basis with my quest to spread around the Jungian coaching method. I'm thinking about perspective and point of view. You see, in coaching, they call it reframing. Apparently, it's very difficult for people to change their point of view because we are condemned to our habits. We'd rather suffer from one point of view that we are accustomed to than innovate or step out of comfort zone. So, in coaching, I find it very challenging, but also very exciting to encourage people to go around the cycle of this London eye and look at the same point from a different point of view. Usually, in your own point of view, you're righteous and you're sure that what you think or feel or convinced of is your truth. But it all depends on the perspective, because what you see definitely from one point of view, like Rashomon, is totally different from another point of view. And therefore, it's very recommended when you think about coaching to encourage your client to change a point of view. The idea of polarities is as ancient as Heraclitus from ancient Greece, who lived in Ephesus, which is apparently now in the south of Turkey. I've been there, an amazing palace of ruins. And Heraclitus said that he coined a concept that was called enantiodromia. Dromo is a street in Greeks. Enanthio is the range between one and the opposite. Jung quotes Heraclitus and uses this concept of enantiodromia when he spoke about the flipping principle. Now, this is a very, very strong coaching tool. When you want to show your coachee the opposite of what your coachee represents or believes, or your business partner, or somebody that you need to collaborate. As a matter of fact, this is the essence of collaboration, being able to bridge between two opposing opinions or ideas or interests. And this is what it's all about. One side of the river, the other side of the river, two opposing realities, each one with its own truths and interests, and how do you bridge between them? Now, what do you need to bridge? In order to bridge, you have to agree to lose or to withdraw or to surrender or to let go of something that you are stuck with, you feel stable on. This is where you're grounded. And I keep saying to my students that it's like standing in a boat, lifting one leg, and before you put your leg on the soil, there is a moment of letting go. You're not anymore in the boat, you're not yet on the soil, but you're in the intermediate phase. And this intermediate phase is a very challenging state psychologically, because you have to trust in what is expecting you in the next step. And this is the whole secret about mediation. Trust your partner, surrender. Nobody wants to move. Each one wants to be on the same riverside, but then you don't meet. Chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim chiri. What is the story of this Mary Poppins? Do you realize she has this talent to fly in the air, taken from the Greek mythology and from the Roman mythology of Jupiter, who has this fire in his legs and is lifting up. The ability of a human being to fly is also embedded in the mythology of Icarus and Daedalus, that were isolated on the island and tried to flee away. That is to say that when you are connected to supernatural powers, you are extending your potential to the impossible. So one motive in this Peter Pan phenomena and Mary Poppins phenomena is lifting yourself up for a dreadful reality. Mind that Peter Pan was also, these are underprivileged children that step out from their destiny and try to change their present reality. When you are connected to the imagination, it's not for you to judge. You are driven by a very strong drive to create something that never existed a moment before. And this is the essence of the idea behind all those musicals. Harry Potter is a magician. A magician is an archetype. A magician is transforming It's an alchemical character that transforming something into something else. And this power of inventiveness, the power of the explorer archetype, of the magician archetype, of the scientist, of the one that takes one reality and in a glimpse turns it into another reality, is embedded in the archetype of the positive trickster. The positive trickster that has these talents, knowledge, wisdom to take one substance and turn it into another. Part of the excitement of stepping into such a store, as I have experienced it years ago when I did it first time crossing the threshold, is fear. Fear to play the game of the forbidden. Now, there are people who are not afraid. It's about awareness. It's about prick of conscience. It's about father principle. Get away from all this. We can pass a whole life cycle without bring into actualization our fantasy world. And all this has to do with daring to fantasize. You see, this mechanism of fantasy starts when we are babies, when we fantasize the breast of our mother. And from there on, it's a matter of inhibition till we get to decide to overcome the obstacle of the education, tradition, religion, inhibitions, and step into the world of fantasy. Why would people be attracted to humiliation? What has this to do with sexual pleasure? It all has to do with what we discussed previously about the enanthiodomia. When somebody is very much in the decency, in the politeness, in the clear and the pure, one wants to examine the other side of the polarity, the humiliation, the shit, this part that is really bringing you to the other part of the experience. And this is a wonderful game that people play when they feel free to experience both sides of the coin. And obviously there is $1 million industry that is based on our willingness to shut up when we want to scream. Jung is being kicked out from the Psychoanalytic Association led by Freud and dives into the irrational text of alchemy. There are 7 techniques to turn metals to become gold. This is the basic assumption of alchemy, for the alchemists of the 14th and 15th century. Obviously, it was impossible to turn metals into gold, but the reports of the processes, how to do it, is parallel to psychic changes. This is what we always do in psychotherapy or coaching. So, what do we have here? There is fire. There is boiling the oil. This is called in Latin calcinatio, heating. When you invest a lot of energy into something, eventually it will turn from one entity into the other. How is it in practical coaching? Do more. Just do more. The rule of big numbers. If you tried to get clients and there are too few of them, call more people. Expose yourself more. Accelerate the fire and you will have a change. What about these spices? These spices are turning a substance into something that is a bit different by the addition of an external substance. So this again is contributing to the variety of tastes and food. There are 6 more techniques to change, for example, sublimation, For example, sorting out and taking the wet substance out of the material to stay with the solid. All these techniques are actually applied in the Chinese cooking, in the Eastern cooking, and in the Italian food, in the Russian food, in the Mediterranean food. Change is all about processing and playing with energy. Good appetite. Wow. I'd like to reflect about China, about East and West. When I read first about the idea of anima and animus, I was wondering, where did Jung take this idea about the feminine and the masculine principle? And not only that I found it very weird and very genius, and yes, I understood that it comes somewhere from the yin and yang. Nevertheless, I was studying this year during the Corona pandemic a 6-month seminar about Jung and the Buddhist and the Tao and the Eastern wisdom, and then things figured out in the puzzle. So here is the story. In 1924, Wilhelm Reich, a German Christian, came back from China after staying 24 years in China. He was a Chinologist, and he translated the I Ching book, the Book of Change, into German, and he became an intimate friend of Jung. And only then did I understand that Jung took all the wisdom of the East and installed it in the feminine principle. This is complementary to the Western culture from which Jung arrived. Jung's father was a priest. They say that 6 priests were in the family. Jung himself was a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and for him the Western knowledge and the Western rationale was very dominant. So with the help of Reich and with the adaptation of the Eastern philosophy, Jung was maybe validating his idea about the feminine principle. What do we have in the feminine principle? And how is it connected to China? Irrationality, circulation, containment, intuition, imagination, nature. They all belong to the Eastern culture, whereas rationality, speed, linear line, the word, discipline belong to the Western society. What I feel and sense and know that is extremely practical is when you apply in coaching the whole dimension, the whole range between the feminine principle, the Chinatown, and the masculine Western principle, Westminster Church. And when you put them together, you are enlarging your personality, you are extending the options of your relatedness, of your behavior and choices. However, this is really challenging because for some people, the Eastern culture is strange, and people are suspicious of exploring this side because they want to stay on the rational side, on the Western side. And for other people who are very much Western side, they find it very exotic to explore the feminine principle. So now we are going to have a nice Chinese dinner, and when I will eat with chopsticks, break my fingers to be able to lift up pieces of meat, I would think about the inferior function of the Westerner when we dive into the East. Luckily enough, in recent years, like 50 last years, the Eastern culture invaded the West with the mindfulness, with yoga, with Reiki, with meditation, and I think we are benefiting from both flavors these days. This exhibition is by Phoebe Collins James, born in 1987. And the first thing that burst out is the clay material, Mother Earth. Working with her fingers and connecting to the very basic activity of women ever in human history. The women that create the house facilities and the garments and the weaving. And the ancient Greeks had this goddess Hestia, who was the goddess of the house, who was in charge of the fire and the cooking. And when we say cooking, we think about processing. So if you look at it, there is several stages in the process of the container, which is a main symbolism of the feminine. The womb and the stomach and the house and the dome. So we are circulating a very basic collective unconscious symbol of the feminine principle. I will go around and let's see how the emblems and the symbols on the wall validate my assumption that we are in a temple of the feminine principle or the anima. So you see that, speaking about the black clay, the polarity to the white and the brown, which make the spectrum of Mother Earth, with the breast, which is fertility, the milk that is the essence of life. For a moment, it's a woman. For a moment, it's a warrior. I'm seated at Freud's house in the garden, and I'm reflecting about being by myself. It occurs to me that when Jung wrote his Red Book, 1913, 1916, he was reflecting, diving, hallucinating, associating with his own self. Am I being enough by myself? There is a loneliness and aloneness, and I think the difference is that in loneliness you strive for having contact with somebody, and when you are blessed by aloneness, then you can surrender and dive into yourself. But there is a prerequisite condition to be able to be by yourself, and this has to do with anxiety, that you are surrendering to your fears and concerns and drifting away from the routine preoccupations of the ego and enabling a vacuum space that eventually will be filled up with some creative ideas and fruitful creativity. But in order to arrive to that Garden of Eden, you have to be able to stay in the moment of being by yourself. Worship the moment, not considering that doing nothing and just being by yourself is waste of time, and surrendering with the transcendent function all the way down to sort out your authentic self. So this self-business is quite challenging because we are taught from day one to produce what is expected on the conscious level, and diving into the unconscious is maybe another thing. There is a curse in the concept of dichotomy, like who is better, or you are either Freudian analyst or a Jungian analyst, or why this need to, why not accept diversity and see how the two compensate each other? Of course, with all the respect for Freud, on the way up here, Ramon said to me, what is the significance of Freud? What did he contribute to mankind's culture? And I said, it's all about meaning. Get to understand the meaning of modern life and the meaning of the individual and the significance of childhood for the well-being of a human being. And but you know that eventually one arrives to where one needs to be professionally and also in private life as a matter of coincidence. And myself, I was very young when I came across coincidentally with the Jungian analysts in Israel. I was younger than 30, I'm now 68. And I want to share with you my first experience when I was sent to read the chirology of my lines of my hand. At that time, it was a preliminary condition to be accepted to Jungian analysis that the lines of the hand will be read as a prediction whether you are connected or not connected to your unconscious. And there I am walking as a young psychologist up the stairs of an old building where the wife of Erich Neumann was a chirologist, and I ordered a meeting with her, and she asked me to put my hands like this. She saw that my left thumb is on top. She read my hand and she said, "Oh, psychologist, you cannot be a psychologist. You're so creative. You have to do something with music and art." And I ended up being a clinical psychologist, educational psychologist, and certified expressive art therapist. And this is a long quest that fulfilled all my mature and adult life. And the issue of synchronicity and coincidence is deeply embedded in Jung's approach towards the psyche. Being certified psychologist, what am I to do with coaching, for example? And how would Freud give me a blessing for drifting from one side of the river to the other and not doing it artificially? And this is the story. I was a lecturer in the managerial University of Tel Aviv, and I'm a good lecturer, and one day I came to the dean and I said, "Listen, I have an idea. I want to teach a practicum seminar about archetypes and symbolism in organizations." And she said, "Go for it." And immediately I had to invent tools for coaching that are based on the Jungian psychology. And this is how my method, Jungian coaching method, has developed. Still, I ask myself, from all the places, why did I carry Ramon to Freud's house? And this makes me a bit crying. It has to do with the father archetype. I'm a very creative person, and I was attached very much to my mom, and my father's existence was very passive in my life. And I had to go through hell of hero quests to regain my power as a father. Not only a biological father for 3 children, my eldest is 43 now, but also father for many, many disciples and students. And This is in the essence of my professional activity. I create learning communities, and there are those 5 schools in Europe that we gather before Corona every year, and now the Jungian Coaching community. And I think that coming back to Freud's house is an homage to the importance of accepting the notion to respect the father idea, which gives you, as we know from the animus and the masculine principle, the discipline, structure, order, speed, the power of the word, the power of consciousness and understanding, being compensated by the compensatory function of the unconscious, of course, where the imagination and irrationality and symbolism and metaphors and fantasy dwell. So I'm a person that really deeply believes in what I call better the two than the one. And with all the respect to Freud, I came over here to this Mecca to share with you my professional and ethical and wisdom that is bridging between the psychoanalysis and the analytic psychology. And this is a big pleasure to sit here and speak with you about roots. Coming up to my mind now, the collective unconscious. What do we have in common? Not the diversity, not the dichotomy, not the rigidity, but the opposite. Embrace, show curiosity, and improvise and experience, which for me are the oxygen of very fulfilling life. Thank you.